Hello, Spookaroos, and welcome to Spooky Times with Eric D. This is another one of our classic remix episodes, our last one before we get to episode 199, which will be our look back to look forward. So if you have not done so yet, please call me and tell me about your favorite episode or your favorite moments from the show, or something you found really funny from the show, or something you really hated from the show even. You can find that number listed on our closed Facebook group, The Spookaroos. The Spookaroos is closed, but joining is very easy. You just click on the join request, and then as long as I'll go and look at your profile. If you look like a real person and not some bot or something, then you're in, and you can find the phone number there, and you can also find it on the Patreon. Yes, we have a Patreon now. You can go to patreon.com/witchfinder. Because, of course, Spooky Times is a Witchfinder production. That's patreon.com/witchfinder, all one word. And you can become an official Spookaroo there. We've got 3 levels. With the higher levels, you get a little bit more bonus material. But it's really, silly videos and stuff that I put up. And sometimes, I might put up lost episodes here and there. Speaking of, there is a lost episode related to this show because you're going to hear us talk about cheesy 80s movies tonight on the show. Although some of them, when I look back, even in the original name, because the name of this episode number 25, Cheesy 80 Horror Movies, Kinda, I knew that I was kind of cheating even back then. But I guess in my younger days, I was playing a little fast and loose with the rules here. Because Friday the 13th Part 3, I guess that is still kind of a cheesy movie, even though it's, like a mainstream, well-known movie. And Nightmare on Elm Street 3, I wouldn't consider that actually a cheesy movie. But, these other ones here, The Midnight Hour, Haunted Honeymoon, Waxworks, definitely one of my favorites. Night of the Creeps, another one of my favorites. But, The lost episode I'm talking about is for the Midnight Hour. I actually recorded a full episode about the Midnight Hour during the pandemic. I'm not exactly sure when it was. You know how time works during this thing. But I did one of those Zoom calls that we all have become so familiar with my friend and yours, Emily Ferguson. And she had never seen the Midnight Hour, and we watched it together virtually and then talked about it. But there were some audio issues, and so that episode never got released, but don't worry, we're going to do that one again. If I can find the audio, that might be something, the original audio, that might be something that goes up on the Patreon. So that's an example of the kind of things you can find there. There's also, I'm doing a little creepy crafting, I like to call it. So if you want to do some arts and crafts projects, I can teach you some things, creepy arts and crafts projects. And, yeah, when you support the Witchfinder Patreon, you are supporting both of the podcast and my activities as the official, one and only licensed Witchfinder in the entire world, the Witchfinder of Salem. And it's been a good time, and it's a good way to contact me. People are getting randomly picked to get little prize packages. So who knows? Maybe you join. Maybe you'll be one of them. All right. So I told you about Patreon. I told you about Facebook. And let me tell you about Instagram. You can find me at SpookyAssShit on Instagram. And you can find the website, spookyas.com, where you can listen to almost each and every episode, including the ones no longer available on your favorite streaming service. Because I told you, we're coming up on 200 episodes. And you might say, hey, there's only 100 episodes listed on my favorite streaming service. And, well, yeah, that's true, maybe. But if you go to the website, you can find them there, or you can just keep listening because we're replaying these old ones every other week. So here we go. Without any further ado, come check out some cheesy 80s horror, kinda. I guess these movies do have a cheese factor to them, all of them. But some of them are pretty well-established movies, and they're not like so bad they're good kind of things. Some of them are, but not all of them. And then they're certainly not all horror movies. Some of them are actually family movies, but they're all spooky. But you got to say something in a title, and you don't want to say the mostly horror, but sometimes spooky, kind of cheesy, but some of them aren't, in the title. So I just got to narrow it down and pick a title. So that's what we're going with. Cheesy horror movies from the 80s. Cheesy spooky movies, maybe, if we prefer, from the 80s. And I guess technically some of them aren't even movies because they didn't play in a movie theater. They were made for TV movies. But made for TV movies. So that still counts. I am a child of the 80s. And most of the movies that I'm about to talk about, I guess I probably first saw them on cable. When cable was young and they just used to show the same movies over and over again. Or a lot of times during Halloween, even the networks would show certain movies all the time. And the first movie that we're going to talk about today is an example of one of those movies. It used to be on some network all the time around Halloween. However, now you don't see it anymore.
Tonight, an ABC premiere presentation. Eternity is about to play a nasty little trick.
Who's there?
On the carefree kids of Pitchboard Cove.
Figured out what you're gonna wear to the party yet tonight? Demons, arise.
Yeah!
Come heed my bidding on this night of nights.
Halloween, my favorite time of year.
He's one of them.
I'm not afraid of death. I'm going for it.
The party could go on forever in the midnight hour. Next.
The movie is called The Midnight Hour, and it comes to us from 1985. The film stars Sherry Belafonte, who happens to be Harry Belafonte's daughter. Also in the cast, this is kind of a star-studded cast. Check this out. Levar Burton, who you might remember from Star Trek The Next Generation. He was Geordi LaForge, the guy with the visor. And he was also, of course, the host of Reading Rainbow. Also in the cast, Peter DeLuise, son of Dom DeLuise. And if you're a 21 Jump Street fan, you remember him from that fine television show as well. By the way, I really do like that show, the original 21 Jump Street. The movies, but the original show I really enjoyed. Also in the cast, Kurtwood Smith from Robocop, the good one, the original Robocop. He was kind of the leader of the bad guy gang. Not the main bad guy, but like the gang that the bad guy hires to, deal his drugs and ace Robocop and all that. But probably more famously, he is the dad from that 70s show. Then you have Dick Van Patten, who was... I didn't quite remember who he was, but he looked so familiar. And he was on the TV show 8 is Enough, which I wouldn't know him from. But he was also in some Mel Brooks movies, Spaceballs and Robin Hood Men in Tights. So that is where I recall him from. Then, as a kid, this wouldn't have occurred to me, but Kevin McCarthy, who was in the original 1950s version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which is a classic sci-fi horror film. Also, making his screen debut, a very young Macaulay Culkin, in his first role as an uncredited trick-or-treater. In the story, a group of New England teenagers decide to break into the historical museum in town, and they steal some clothes from some of the displays. Now, what they don't know is that these objects are cursed, and some of them are relatives of the people. One of them was the clothing of a accused witch who was, murdered by the town's witch hunter, whose clothes are also there. And, of course, they're the ones that have teenage relatives still living in town. The curse wakes up the witch, who comes back to life and seeks revenge on the town. Now, she does this by basically unleashing every sort of monster that you can think of on the town. I'm talking zombies. I think it's supposed to be a werewolf. There's definitely something crawling up the side of a building. And vampires. It's weird. She is a witch, but she bites people and they turn into vampires, including LeVar Burton, who, when he gets bit, he turns around and he looks very, very chipper. It is during a dance number. There is a dance number in this movie. I guess they were going for a thriller kind of thing, considering the time and everything. But it doesn't quite work out. But still, a catchy tune that lives on in my memory. I could sing it for you now. I won't. I'll just play a little bit of it for you.
Ooh, I love this song. I'm hung up in a grave situation. The only thing I dig is got a bad reputation. Roll my eyes back inside my head. Spend my days asleep in a pine box bed. Tonight's the night that you're forever mine. A little devil do you right till the end of time. I'm dead, you're dying. Everybody should try it. Get dead. Get high, don't bite it. Everybody's gonna buy it. Get dead.
She's going through town, turning everyone into zombies or vampires. Other monsters are crawling out of the grave and out of the dark of night. Meanwhile, our hero, teenager, is driving down the street when he sees a young woman in a cheerleader's outfit, like a 1950s cheerleader outfit. And, of course, she turns out to be a ghost. But she also realizes what's happening, and then it's up to her and our teenage hero to save the day. I'll let you find the movie to discover what happens. But actually, it's you won't be able to find it legally, most likely, because they have put it out on DVD, but they stopped print of it almost immediately. It was released in 1999 and also in 2000. But for whatever reason, they shut it down. And it's become very rare. In fact, if you find a copy selling on eBay, they're very, very expensive. So right now, you can find the whole thing on YouTube for free. But that probably won't last forever. So if you want to see it, I recommend you go check it out now. There's another weird musical moment in the film, too, where one of the ghouls is singing an opera song. Now, if you don't know opera, it's just like if you think of any opera song that a tenor might sing, it's that one, the one you're thinking of. I'm not sure what it's officially called. I don't know if it's called Rizzi Pagliazzo. Forgive my Italian. I did not study opera. I did not study Italian, but I know it's something like that. But it's a really weird choice. It's the one, it goes like this. Rizzi Pagliaccio. Hope you enjoyed that. It's all the opera you're going to get out of me for the day. I tried to do it quietly so my neighbors wouldn't complain. Anyway, the point of that song, actually, despite not knowing exactly how to pronounce it in Italian, I do know that the song is about a clown whose wife cheats on him. And he finds out right before he's supposed to go perform. So he's basically singing the song to himself, saying, go ahead, clown, put on your makeup, get out there, be funny, make the people laugh, even though your heart is breaking, even though you're crying. Don't smear your makeup. Just get out there, put on a show, make them laugh. So it's a really weird song to use as a call to arms for monsters. But that's what appears to be happening with this song in this film. By the way, the hero has to save the town before midnight. Hence the title, The Midnight Hour. In looking up tidbits on the film, I was surprised to find not a lot of positive writing about the film. Gary Meltzer of DVD Verdict called it a mediocre made-for-TV horror comedy that was not worthy of being released on DVD. Huh. And then Peter Dandel in the Zombie Movie Encyclopedia states, even zombie movie completists will have a hard time stomaching this lame made-for-TV drivel. Now, I won't deny that when you grow up watching something, that nostalgia factor has an effect, but I still enjoy this movie. It's not a terrifying movie, and it's not a particularly funny movie, so I guess if you're looking at it for a horror comedy, you're not going to really find much of either. It's just light fare with spooky themes, which I tend to enjoy. And other people must too, because I looked on Rotten Tomatoes. And the audience score for this movie is 70%, which is fresh. And I would say that's about what it deserves. I'm not saying it's a great movie or anything like that, but to me it is a seasonal classic that I miss being on television. I'm glad that I was able to find a copy of it that I did not have to pay hundreds of dollars for. I would not have been glad to pay hundreds of dollars for it. But if you enjoy Halloween type specials, like, for example, The Worst Witch, or a movie like Teen Witch, the 80s version of Teen Witch, I think you'll dig this movie. So keep an eye out for it on the internet. Again, right now you can find it for free on YouTube. That's The Midnight Hour. Speaking of The Worst Witch and Teen Witch and other such movies, just because we don't talk about them tonight, don't think that I wouldn't include them on this list. I was trying to go for maybe movies that we haven't all heard about a million times, with a couple of exceptions. But obviously those are classics, and we'll talk about them on a future episode. And also, just because I talk about something on this episode, this is by no means meant to be a full review of any of these movies. So I reserve the right to go back to these films in the future and talk about them more in depth. Some of them we definitely will be. Some of them, this might be the last you hear. Moving on, I want to tell you about my favorite Friday the 13th movie.
Weekends are a good time to escape to the woods. Unless the weekend begins with Friday the 13th. Because 13 is an unlucky number. But out here, so are 1 through 12. Because these are Jason's woods. And nobody leaves them alive. Friday the 13th, Part 3.
Now, obviously, Friday the 13th is a franchise that is well established. You can probably find other podcasts that talk about not just this installment, but every installment. But I did want to make a special mention of Friday the 13th, Part 3, because it is like basically a campy 80s movie. And to me, Jason Voorhees and Freddy Krueger, who you might hear about later on, those are the icons of 80s horror. I shouldn't even just say to me, like I'm discovering it. Like everybody knows that. And I will be met with resistance on this, I'm sure. To me, Friday the 13th Part 3 is my favorite of all the Friday the 13th movies. Now, I want to make the distinction. I am not saying it is the best movie. It's not the best written. It's not the best acted. It's not the best any of those categories. But it has everything you want in a Friday the 13th movie. It's got the camp setting. It's got adult, full-size Jason as the killer. And it's got the hockey mask. Not only does it have the hockey mask, but it has the hockey mask for the very first time. That's right. It takes all the way till Part 3, till Jason gets his now iconic hockey mask. Friday the 13th Part 3 comes to us from 1982. And this one was shot in 3D. And if you watch it on DVD, you'll notice a lot of the things where the 3D was supposed to come into effect. Like there's a scene with a yo-yo and some popcorn, and then Jason shoots a harpoon, and all these things are coming right at the screen. It's supposed to be in 3D. So when you watch it on DVD, it looks a little cheesy now, especially if you're not watching it in 3D. But if you can get over that, you've got your basic Friday the 13th story. Counselors going to a camp, trying to reopen it in time. There's a killer on the loose in the woods, killing them off one by one. In addition to that, however, there's also a biker gang that gets thrown into the mix. They have a run-in with some of the kids at a convenience store, and then they end up chasing them back to the camp. But once there, their plans are foiled because they run amok of Mr. Jason Voorhees, and they all get killed in different ways in the barn. Jason gets his mask from the practical jokester of this group, your stereotypical slasher movie practical joker. It's a real nerdy-looking guy, a little chubby guy named Shelley. And as I was researching, I wondered whatever happened to old Shelley. And it turns out the actor who played Shelley His name is Larry Zerner. He is now a very, very successful entertainment lawyer, and he's handled some big cases. So good for you, Shelley. Jason kills Shelley, and that's when he gets his hockey mask, because Shelley had been wearing it. Now, the hockey mask was not specified in the script. It just said that he takes a mask to cover his face. The way they got the hockey mask is director Steve Miner called for a lighting check, but no one on the crew wanted to put on any of Jason's face makeup for the check. So they just decided to throw a mask on the man playing Jason. The film's 3D effects supervisor, Jay Sadoff, had a bag full of his hockey equipment with him, and he pulled out a Detroit Red Wings goaltender mask just to use for the test. But Steve Miner loved the look of the mask so much, he decided to alter it slightly and use an enlarged version of the mask with the painted on red triangles in the film. They punched in some extra holes, added the triangles, made it a little bit wider and a little bit longer, put it on the stuntman playing Jason, and a horror icon was born. It's really as simple a premise as Friday the 13th can get. There's not a ton of story involvement. He's at the camp killing teenagers wearing a hockey mask. To me, that's a Jason movie. That's an 80s horror movie. That's perfect. However, unlike The Midnight Hour, I'm not finding a huge amount of agreement with me on this subject. Rotten Tomatoes, the critics gave it a 12% grade. And I thought, well, critics never like straight up slasher movies. They always give them poor reception. So let's find out what the audience think. What's the audience score? The people who want to see these kinds of movies. Well, they only gave it a 43. So it looks like I'm alone here. But if you love Friday the 13th Part 3 like I do, let me know. Let me know I'm not alone out there in this opinion. We go from a movie that I love to a movie that I cannot be more disappointed in.
It should have been the happiest moment of their lives, the night they came home to be married at the house of Great Aunt Kate. But it turned into a haunted honeymoon.
I know that one of you is a werewolf. Oh, hairy, all over. What?
1986's Haunted Honeymoon. Just listen to this cast, and you'll understand why I'm so disappointed. You had Gene Wilder as the male lead. His wife at the time, Gilda Radner, of Saturday Night Live fame, in her final movie appearance before dying of ovarian cancer. You had Dom DeLuise, who I loved, of course, from the American Tail movies, which may have been after this, but again, we're not going by the order they came out. I'm talking about the order I saw them in. And then Jonathan Pryce, who you might know from a bunch of movies. I think probably most famously recently he was been in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. But if you're a Broadway fan, you'll know him as the engineer from Miss Saigon. Now, with a cast like that, how could this movie fail? Well, it fails so bad because I wanted to like this movie as a kid. I knew Gene Wilder. I knew Dom DeLuise. I really wanted to enjoy this movie. It had monsters in it. It was set in an old haunted castle. There was a wolf man. All sorts of things were happening. Spooky. It's got everything I need, right? I don't remember much about this movie. I remember my mom didn't like it. I remember her saying, oh, yeah, you can watch it if you want. It's not very good. I remember watching it as a child and thinking, yeah, that wasn't very good. I remember starting to watch it a little bit more recently and thinking, yeah, this isn't very good. I think I'm just going to turn it off. The story is that Gene Wilder and Gilda Radner, first of all, it's set in olden days, and they're radio stars. They have a radio mystery hour in New York City. Now, Gene is engaged to Gilda Radner in the movie, and he decides they're going to go to his family's ancestral home. And of course, once there, Gilda Radner's character gets to meet the extended family, who are all eccentric and wacky, including Dom DeLuise, who is in drag and playing Gene Wilder's aunt in this film. Now, Gene Wilder, like I said, is a radio star, but he's been having panic attacks on air, which is affecting his performance, and they're afraid he's going to lose his job. So his uncle comes up with a plan to scare him out of these outbursts, like you would scare someone with hiccups, right? That's the idea. So he comes up with this whole plan and gets the whole family to play along. But without ruining the movie, in case you do want to see it, they're not the only things making plans in the house. Wah-ah-ah-ah. The movie, unfortunately, is not funny, which is surprising considering it was written by Gene Wilder. Maybe he just doesn't have the magic without Mel Brooks. And it makes me wonder why Mel Brooks wasn't involved in this film. It seems like it would have been right up his alley. I mean, we know he did Young Frankenstein, and he would go, which is a great film, by the way. And he would go on to do Dracula, Dead and Loving It, which is not a great film, by the way. So why not do his take on one of the old haunted house movies? But for whatever reason, he did not. And we're left with a Gene Wilder solo vanity project, which I'm sad to say disappoints. I'm not the only one with this opinion this time. I looked it up on Rotten Tomatoes. It currently has a freshness rating of just 25%. Such a great cast. Gone to waste. Here's one that was shown on cable all the time. I remember seeing this about 1 million times, and it also made me a little creeped out about slugs. I can only be talking, of course, about 1986's Night of the Creeps.
The night of the formal is finally here. For Chris, Cindy, and JC. It's going to be the best night of their lives. But tonight is also the night of the creeps. From a world unknown comes a nightmare unimagined. First, they are under you, around you, on you, and then inside you.
You get in through your mouth, and you walk around while they incubate, even if you're dead.
They are a new breed of terror.
Hey!
They are a different kind of horror.
Zombies, exploding heads, creepy crawlies. We could have a little problem.
The creeps are taking over.
Oh, I got good news and bad news, girls. The good news is your dates are here.
What's the bad news?
They're dead.
You have never had a night like this. Night of the creeps. If you scream, you're dead.
Two college students who are trying to pledge to a fraternity decide the way they'll get in the good graces of their frat brothers is they'll break in to a cryogenic chamber, steal a corpse, and place it on the steps of a rival school's frat house. Well, things don't go quite according to plan, because when they get to the cryogenic place and they open the container with the body reaches out and tries to attack them. They run in horror, but what they don't know is they've just released an alien invasion upon the Earth. That's right. What they found was the body of an escaped mental patient. I told you these aren't supposed to be full reviews of the movies, so forget why this person was frozen and how this alien life form ended up in his body. They explain it in the movie, but just watch the movie. The important thing is the teens have unleashed these slugs on the town, and now the slugs are entering people and turning them into zombies. The film is a nod to any of the classic invasion movies, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, for example, and all sorts of kind of 50s and 60s B pictures, but also there's lots of references to more what would have been at the time modern horror. For example, a lot of the character names are names of famous horror directors. Just about everybody from the 70s and 80s is included in there. So if you're a sci-fi horror fan, there's plenty of inside nods for you to pay attention for and appreciate when you watch the film. This film didn't do great at the box office. However, again, probably most likely thanks to its repeated showings on television throughout the 80s and 90s, it did develop a cult following, and it currently has a 69% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes. It took a long time to get to DVD. I don't think it came out until about 2008, 2009, and I remember there were big petitions going all around when DVDs first came out, around the turn of the century, I suppose, to get this out there. Took a long time, but they finally delivered. Moving on to our second horror icon of the 80s of the night. Give it up for Frederick Krueger.
Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3. Freddy's just around the corner.
That's right, completely coincidentally, I have also chosen the third installment of the Nightmare on Elm Street series to be included on this list, just like I chose Part 3 of Friday the 13th. I guess in franchises, it just takes them a little while to find their groove, and for me, Part 3 is the sweet spot. This time, however, I am not alone in this opinion. Unlike Friday the 13th Part 3, which most people do not seem to be particularly fond of, there is a lot of love out there for Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors. The movie once again stars Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger, and even Heather Langenkamp is back as Nancy. Another returning cast member is John Saxon, who plays Nancy's father. Now, I remember meeting John Saxon a long time ago at the very first horror convention I ever went to. It was in New Jersey, and I was staying in the hotel where it was taking place. I woke up the next morning and went downstairs for my free continental breakfast. And who's standing next to me in line for breakfast but John Saxon? He was very humble and pleasant. Good guy. Other Hollywood luminaries making an appearance in this film include Lawrence Fishburne of Pee-wee's Playhouse fame, and maybe you might remember him from a little movie called The Matrix. And you also have talk show host Dick Cavett playing himself, along with Zsa Zsa Gabor. I had a really hard time saying her name. I really had to think about it. Zsa. And you also have Patricia Arquette, star of True Romance, and a co-star of one of my very favorite movies of all time, Ed Wood. The story of this film concerns a teen locked up in a mental institution after an apparent suicide attempt that was really Freddy Krueger slashing her wrist with his glove. But there's an intern therapist there who happens to believe her story. And that intern is none other than Nancy Thompson. She discovers that this patient, as long as several other young patients, are all having dreams about Freddy. Freddy kills some, and they all look like suicides because they're in a mental institution. The most famous one, probably, one of the most famous scenes in any Nightmare on Elm Street film, is the one where he rips out the guy's tendons and muscles, and he uses them as a puppet, and he kind of moves him around like a marionette up to a ledge, and he makes him jump off. It's a very famous scene. And only Nancy is the one who believes that it's really Freddy Krueger doing all this stuff. So basically, they don't really say this in the film, but they discover the power of lucid dreaming, and that they all can have powers in their dream. Now, they all have different powers. Like, one of them, he's in a wheelchair, but in his dreams, he can walk. And also, he's, like, super obsessed with a role-playing game that's kind of like Dungeons and Dragons knockoff. And he's got these, like, wizard powers. One turns into, like, a tough punk chick with a switchblade. And then Kincaid, who's, the black character, he gets a superhuman strength. And then the character who can't speak in his dream, he's got kind of a sonic scream like the Banshee from X-Men. So actually, as a kid, this was the very first Nightmare on Elm Street movie I ever saw. I remember that my brother was watching it, must have been on cable or something, later at night than I would normally be up, but for whatever reason I was up, and I said that I wanted to watch it, and he said, I don't care if you watch it or not, but if it gives you nightmares, don't blame me. I'm telling you, it's a scary movie, and I don't want to hear any crap from Mom, so if you watch it, that's your own problem. Well, I did watch it, and I think it must have been right around when I was in second grade, because I remember going into school soon after that and writing a story sort of based on it. Not exactly Freddy, and not with all the gore and everything, but I remember, I used elements from the story. I made it my own. It was a picture book. I wish I knew where it was. It's probably lost forever now, but if I had it, I would certainly post that online for you to enjoy. As I said, I'm not the only one who loves this movie. Plenty of Nightmare on Elm Street fans would tell you this is the best movie in the franchise. And, I mean, it's got all the classic stuff that you want from a Nightmare on Elm Street movie. Plus, there's a scene where Freddy possesses his own skeleton in the real world and does battle with the children in that form. That's 1987's A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, with a hard-rockin' theme song by Dawkins.
Who will dare to face the challenge of the funhouse? Who is mad enough to enter that world of darkness?
Something is alive in the funhouse. Something not alive like its father. Something better dead. Something that has the form of a human, but not the face.
This better be good.
It's gonna be great.
Something that feeds off the flesh and blood of young innocents.
Come on, here we go. This is it.
Something that tonight will turn the funhouse into a carnival of terror.
Welcome, brave souls, to the Funhouse. That's right, the Funhouse. Step right up, ladies and gentlemen. The Funhouse from 1981, directed by Tobe Hooper, most famous for directing Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original. Also Poltergeist. The plot of this movie is pretty basic. A group of teens go to a traveling carnival, and they decide to go into the Funhouse, which is really a spook house, a dark ride. You know, the kind you get on the little cart and it moves you around and it's all dark inside and vampires pop up and jump out and that kind of stuff. Animatronic, on a spring kind of stuff. But they decide, as a goof, they're going to get out of their carts and spend the night in the Funhouse. Well, that turns out to be a bad idea, because when they do that, they see the assistant, the one who had been dressed like Frankenstein, wearing a Frankenstein mask, and helping load the teenagers into the carts and then push the carts on their way onto the track. He is hiring a prostitute. But the problem is, he has premature ejaculation. Then he wants his money back, but the prostitute refuses to give him back the $100. So, in a fit of rage, he kills her. Now the kids have seen this, and eventually he notices that they see him, and he starts trying to murder them, and he does so successfully, one by one, with the help of his father, who happened to be the talker outside, or barker, as you civilians call them, but really, they're talkers. The main monster in the film, of course, takes off his Frankenstein mask, and it is revealed to have a hideously deformed face. All typical 80s slasher horror film kind of stuff. It is a well-done movie for what it is. However, it doesn't have the terror of a Texas Chainsaw Massacre or the more refined style of maybe Poltergeist, so it's not the strongest movie Tobe Hooper ever did. But still, I find it quite enjoyable nonetheless. It's definitely worth taking a look at. Oh, and I almost forgot. An interesting thing about this is that they actually did a novelization of the movie. And it was written by a guy you might have heard of before, named Dean Koontz, under the pseudonym Owen West.
It's 11:45. Let's go.
Imagine, if you will, an exhibit in fear.
It looks a little spooky, boys. You think we should do this?
A place that appeals to your deepest and darkest fantasies.
Ooh, scary.
Your fascination with ghosts, monsters, and the many unearthly elements of the supernatural.
Welcome to the Vets
Look.
Now this is killer.
Enjoy.
Wow, the glasses from Nutty Zombies from Hell.
Lose yourself in it.
Would you like a closer look?
Really?
But whatever you do, don't step over the rope.
Welcome, my dear. We thought you were too tired.
The last movie I want to talk about tonight comes to us from 1988, and it is called Waxwork. It stars Zach Galligan, who you might remember as the main character from Gremlins and Gremlins 2. Deborah Foreman, who starred in Valley Girl. David Warner, who looked really familiar, and I looked him up. He apparently was in the Star Trek movies, some of the Star Trek movies, and also on a few episodes of The Next Generation. I can't claim to be that big a Trekkie, but maybe I saw him in those things and just don't remember. Then we have Dana Ashbrooks, who was on Twin Peaks. He played Bobby Briggs. Then we have Patrick Mcnee, who, of course, we know from The Avengers. I believe he played the Hulk. Just kidding. He was in the original Avengers, the British show, with the bowler hat and the umbrella. Then we have John Rhys Davies, who's most famous these days for playing Gimli in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and he was also in Indiana Jones. Now, the plot of this movie, basically, some teenagers are walking by a haunted house that says it's going to be opening soon. They're kind of laughing about it. Then the owner, presumably, pops out and says to these young women, hey, you know, we're not going to be open to the public, but how would you and your friends like a special preview of the museum? If you come back here tonight, I'll let you guys in for free. From there, there's a lot to the plot, but basically, they go to the wax museum, and they find that if they step over the rope, they enter into the scene. And of course, it's a chamber of horrors. So each scene has a different monster, or at least a villainous character, lurking inside. There's a wolf man, there's the Marquis de Sade, there's Dracula, there's one with zombies, all sorts of different creatures, nightmare fuel creatures. The movie is actually, again, if you just kind of let go and sit and enjoy it, the basic idea, people go to a wax museum, the scenes turn into real things once you step into them. That's good enough for me. I'm a sucker for wax museums, in real life and in movies. So, it's all gravy to me. So as I said, this was not meant to be an in-depth conversation on any of these movies, just sort of bringing them up and seeing which ones you've heard of, perhaps inspiring you to find ones that you haven't heard of, and hopefully bringing back some good memories. Maybe you used to watch these on television like I did when you were a kid, on lonely Saturdays or Saturday nights. I actually had a few more on the list, but I can see that we're at time, so I guess we'll have to save those movies for another day. Some of them deserve a little bit more talking to anyway, like Killer Clowns from Outer Space, Mr. Boogedy. We'll get to all that stuff, don't you worry. Just because you didn't hear about them right now doesn't mean you won't ever hear about them. In the meantime, friends, don't forget to friend us on Facebook, facebook.com/spookyas. Find our website at spookyasshit.com, where you can see little special features from every single episode, including this one. And you can find links to all of our social media. And if you have questions or comments, I'd especially love to hear comments on this episode. First of all, tell me what you think of me hosting by myself. Again, not something I really want to make a habit of, but I think they're going okay, right? you let me know. Let me know what movies you'd like to hear talked about in further detail. Let me know which ones you remember. Let me know your memories of watching them. Did they terrify you? Did they give you an aversion to slugs or any other kind of creatures? Don't forget, please, please, please tell a friend about the show, and please rate, subscribe, and review on iTunes or wherever you happen to get us from, but especially iTunes. Until next time, don't be afraid.